welcome everyone. I'm delighted to have with us Stan Pace and Brett Morehouse, who are founders of CaluSolv, a proprietary blend of materials that is transforming the earth as we know it and deepening the root structure, allowing for the permeability, the oxygen, the nutrients, and the food to be more nutritious as a result of their treatments, and for the soil actually to be fully restored to its living status. And so we look forward to your questions on their presentation here. And I will just turn it over to the gentleman who will walk us through what CaluSolv does and the science behind it and a few case studies. And then we'll have time for discussion and your ideas. We hope you'll be thinking about where this would be applicable in India, what obstacles they may encounter, and who they should be partnering with, because they do not currently distribute in India and would welcome distribution or even manufacturing partners, I believe. So over to you, gentlemen.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Stan, go ahead to the next slide.
Good morning.
Can you bump it to the next slide, Stan? So as Mary explained, Stan founded this company, and I'm his partner, CaluSolv. And what Stan has created is a soil amendment, because in his years of agriculture, what he had found or determined in his studies was that, at least in Western agriculture in the United States, the number one problem that we're finding and seeing in production agriculture is soil compaction. And when you have the soil compaction, it exacerbates and creates a bunch of other issues that lead to overactive. Okay. That leads to over application of synthetic fertilizers, and also which in turn leads to needing to use pesticides and herbicides and other things, all of which are further the cycle of compaction. So CaluSolv was designed primarily with the intention of addressing that issue, and then also incorporating regenerative management practices so that we can restore the soil, reinvigorate the microbial life in the soil, and create that stable soil aggregate structure that we need, that allows for water infiltration, retention, and just fixes a lot of things. So we've got over 1,600 soil samples covering 23 states. And what we're saying is 95% of those show that soil compaction is the number one problem. And we look at it differently than probably conventional agriculture. If you talk to university professors in the United States, or to agronomists or extension agents, and ask about compaction, they're primarily going to tell you it's heavy equipment traveling over wet soils that is causing compaction. But as we travel around these same areas, and I see these fields that are completely covered in water after a heavy rainfall, every inch of that field is covered. Well, that equipment is not traveling over every inch of that field. So what we've determined, or what we believe, and I think some other people are starting to understand it, is that the management practices and the chemicals that we're applying to these soils are destroying the biology. And at the end of the day, stable soil aggregate structure is completely reliant upon a vibrant and active soil microbiome. If I have a strong soil microbiome and its aggregate structure, I can drive over it with a piece of equipment. And kind of building on a previous presentation that Mary had showed us, that soil is a sponge. It will bounce back, and it'll retain the water and everything else. So she'd also sent us something, and this is from I think it's a university extension agent in California. They call it the OWL concept, but it's the same thing that we believe in, is that the first thing that has to happen when we start to reverse the soil compaction is we've got to get oxygen back into that soil. Because when the soil is compacted and there's no oxygen, the only microbes that are really thriving in that environment are the pathogenics more than the beneficials. So if I can get the oxygen back into the soil, not only does my microbial life start to return, the bacteria start to come alive, they start to help build some soil aggregate structure, which we'll talk about in a minute, that then allows the beneficial mycorrhizal fungi to get also involved. But it also gets oxygen into my root system so that that plant becomes more photosynthetically efficient. It can have respiration occurring in the soil in the root system, so it doesn't tax the plant to send metabolites down into the roots to help them grow. By also loosening up that soil, I get a deeper, more robust root structure, which also helps my photosynthetic ability of that plant. So the second benefit, obviously, is that I'm getting more water infiltration into the soil. As I do that, it gets deeper into the soil. I can retain it better. And those two things are what are going to trigger that microbial life coming back to the soil, which is ultimately, not only does it take care of, as we'll get into in a minute, also creating a stable soil aggregate structure, but it increases my residue decomposition, nutrient cycling. It's going to help rebuild soil organic matter, which is roughly 60% carbon. So that's going to help with water retention. And then those microbes are also constantly communicating with that plant, whatever in that field, to ensure that that plant is as healthy as it can be, because they're symbiotic and they need each other. So go ahead. So if this is a typical water cycle, where CaluSolv, what we're focused on is in the area where it says the field water cycle, because we're dealing with agriculture. That's our main, I know primarily focus of Mary's group is water security and being able to retain, and she was explaining some of the efforts that all of you are doing. We're focused on agriculture and trying to increase not only the production of agricultural properties, but also lower their operating costs to make it a more profitable operation for the farmer or the producer, and also increasing the nutrient density of what's being produced. Because the way the production agriculture, at least in our country, is today, they're focused on yield, they're focused on volume, they're not focused on quality, and it is showing in our health, the health of the population that's eating the food that's being grown and the way it's processed. So we feel if we can fix the soil and we can get it to where it is operating the way it's supposed to, we can solve a number of problems at once. We can increase the nutrient density of the food that's being grown, which is kind of our primary focus. But as you can see, if I can get the infiltration going down into the soil, it's going to the water table and going into the watershed, whether it's a river, a lake, or whatever. Whereas if you imagine this solid black line here is a compaction layer, what's happening when we get rainfall is everything's running off the top. So I've got erosion, I've got runoff of over-applied phosphorus and phosphates and over-applied nitrates or nitrogen, and that's ending up in the watershed, that's ultimately ending up in the ocean, and it's causing problems from the field all the way downstream. So yeah, our goal with respect to the water cycle is to increase the infiltration and retention. So our belief is that the way we have farmed, and at least again, all of my reference points are to Western agriculture, conventional agriculture, as I call it, is primarily due to the way we've managed our soils for the last 70 years, 80 years plus. Excessive tillage, we're in this country, they're trying to get away from it. The problem is, as they've moved to a no-till type of agriculture, they've coupled that with chemicals. They think they need chemicals to kill the weeds, to take care of what they used to do with tillage. And so that's led to excessive amounts of Roundup or glyphosate being applied, and other what I call rescue chemicals. Historically, they've left the land fallow for extended periods. So the issues there are, one, there's not a living root in the soil, so there's nothing to feed those microbes that are living off the root exudates that that come from all of the plants that hopefully would be in the field. But the other issue does relate almost directly to water. Is it's been shown, for years in this country, people were saying, well, I don't want to plant something in rotation that's not a cash crop for me because it will use up the nutrients in the water in the soil. But studies have shown, and I don't know why people don't pay more attention to this, that bare land will have more water loss through evaporation than will be used by a cover crop that is keeping that moisture in the soil and also keeping that soil cooler, while it's also feeding the biology and continuing to rebuild the soil quality. So those two in conjunction may be two of the worst issues that have caused that lead to soil compaction. Another issue is, while we don't have straight monocultures so much in our cash crop rotations, but they're very limited. They may be in the Midwest, it's corn, maize, or soybeans, wheat, and they just go back and forth between those 2 or 3 limited rotations for 40, 50 years. And that limits the association with different microbes and biology in the soil, so they don't get the full benefit of what's out there. And then the last one is we don't understand, or maybe I think they do, they don't care, the impact the synthetic fertilizers and all these herbicides and pesticides have on the microbe population. We massively apply too much nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and the synthetic forms of what we use, each one of those is detrimental to soil microbe population. I mean, the plants need nitrogen. We're not saying not to ever use synthetic nitrogen, but the way we apply it in the excessive amounts, and they've created solutions to that are almost worse than the problem they were addressing. And by that I mean, a lot of urea and a lot of anhydrous ammonia are used in this country, and the urea, if the way they put it on and the timing they put it on, they've had to create what they call inhibitors that are an extra cost to the producer that they add to these nitrogen inputs. And a urea inhibitor is basically a formaldehyde designed to kill the biology, because they know the biology is using up the nitrogen before the plant can get to it, and it's volatilizing back into the atmosphere. So it's actually creating nitrous oxide and things that are worse than CO2. And then the herbicides and the pesticides they're designed to kill bacteria and fungal infections, and they kill everything. They don't just attack. They can't target it to the pathogens, so they blanket spray it. And essentially, most conventional agricultural land in this country is compacted and almost devoid of microbial life. So it creates a downward spiral of needing more and more synthetic fertilizers and rescue chemicals to continue to be commercially viable with that crop. So what we've got to do is understand that it's our management practices that are primary contributors to this issue, and then figure out where do we start to rebuild the soil so that we can have the time to change these management practices and get back to where you have a productive soil that allows a person to maintain or actually increase their profits from farming and doing what they want to do, but also get the benefits of having more water infiltration, retention, better nutrient cycling, and actually the longer I can keep a plant in that soil and it's photosynthesizing, it's constantly sending root exudates back into the soil. So I'm putting carbon back into the soil and taking it out of the air. So those are some of the combined benefits.
If I can, let me jump in here. Sure. Well, basically, in the world, what has occurred is we have two systems of farming Brett just really described. And the conventional way is a high input situation where we focus on the plant, we focus on yields, and the world, whoever, focuses on the economy of that, because if I can keep a farmer or even a lawn owner in this country the largest irrigated crop in America is turf. So, I mean, that covers a lot of urban lawns. And so there's a tremendous amount of chemicals that are used. But if I can keep you focused on the plant, there's more inputs that I can sell you. I can sell you 15 different nutrients. I can sell you, and Brett's just described every bit of that. I can sell you the herbicides and the insecticides and the fungicides. The opposite of that is to focus on the soil. The high input system, very low profitability, if at all, because the symptoms and the side effects that come with that is you destroy your soil. You become you produce a disease-inducing soil. So the opposite side of that coin is the regenerative way, which is what we're talking about. And we focus on the soil and what we believe we found. And I'll jump off here and let Brett continue. But what we found is the regenerative way. If we just focus on the soil, it's not that complicated anymore. And the benefits are water and food and human health and animal health, and just it just balloons from there. So,
okay, if you can go ahead and just we're going to show a short video. This is produced by the University of Purdue, but it shows the difference between a well compacted soil and a conventional soil, and it'll show you how quickly the runoff can occur and how the erosion occurs. Go ahead, Stan, and I'll just kind of let it speak to itself.
Is that coming through, Mary?
Yes.
The last demonstration I want to show to you today is the difference between a conventionally tilled soil and a no-till soil. And so what I have in my hands are two clods, one clod from a conventionally tilled site and one from a no-till site. So first I'm going to put the conventionally tilled soil in this one here and the no-till one in this column. So what this demonstrates is the importance of soil organic matter. In the conventionally tilled sites, it's been plowed year after year after year, and the organic matter is essentially gone. Even though the clods look very similar, the organic matter has gone through decomposition. Organic matter is the key to holding soils together. And the reason for that is not just the organic matter itself, but it's the bacteria that live on the soil and so forth. The fungi, which actually have the fungal hyphae, which sort of wraps around the particles in the soil and holds it together. You can see the impact that organic matter has on aggregate stability and the formation of good granular structure in the surface.
So what we were trying to show with that video is the one where the aggregate was obviously dissolving into the water. That's exactly what happens on the surface of a compacted soil. Those small particles of silt and whatever are they're washing off, and they're carrying away organic matter, they're carrying away nutrients and everything else, whereas the one that had the organic matter in it, obviously it's going to hold on to more of the water. It's going to infiltrate deeper because your root systems are going to be deeper too. And that's another thing that in conventional farming in the U.S., not only, like Stan was saying, are they focused on the plant, when they do look at the soil, they're only looking at what they call the A horizon. So it's 6 to 8 inches deep. That's where they put their nutrients, and they can make plants grow and can yield. They have a hard time making them grow and be productive as far as nutrient density. But what we're trying to do is focus on educating producers and farmers that your soil horizon should be 36, 48 inches deep. We want the roots, we want the water, we want everything going as deep into that soil profile as possible, because there are nutrients throughout that profile. We run a soil test as part of our package when we deal with farmers and producers that show them that they have hundreds of pounds of nutrients per acre of nitrogen, phosphate, potassium, and zinc that a typical soil test is not going to show them. Now, a lot of those nutrients are locked up. They're tied into the soil structure, or they're chemically bound to each other. But in active soil biology, that is one of their purposes, is to break that loose and make that available to the plant as the plant needs it. And in modern conventional agriculture in the United States anyway, they've completely lost. They don't believe that. They don't believe that's possible. We're showing it on farms that we're working with that it is. And we'll give you a case study here in a little bit where we've got an alfalfa field in Iowa that we haven't put any phosphorus or potassium on in 5 years, I think, Stan, is that right? And
That's correct.
And it outproduces neighbors fields that are conventionally managed, and the infiltration rate, we've managed to increase it greatly, but we'll get to that in a minute. So what we've come to believe or understand is that if I want to reverse soil compaction and build a soil sponge, I have to start, aggregation is the key. And when it gets to that compacted level, I have to start at the base or the foundation, and that is, I have to get into that. Soil is composed of clay particles, silt, sand, biology. And where we start is, our product is a calcium-based product because Stan, over his years of research, determined and found out that calcium is the key to flocculating and aggregating the clay particles in the soil. And that is the first step in the process of allowing the oxygen back into the soil. And when that happens, I can start to get my biology back to work. Another benefit of that is now my roots get deeper, and that helps loosen up the soil. So all of these things work hand in hand. And part of the problem with, again, I keep coming back to the way we look at the things in the United States. I'm not sure where it's the same everywhere, but everyone operates in silos. Right? We compartmentalize and we say, well, if I focus on this one thing, as Stan was saying, I focus on the plant, and other people are like, well, I only focus on, they don't look at the soil as a holistic ecosystem that involves the plant, the microbes, and everything else around it, and the nutrients in it. And they try to reduce it to, I just want to look at nitrogen, or I just want to look at phosphate, and how to feed that plant this one nutrient, as opposed to, how do I fix the soil to take care of all this at once? So but using soluble calcium ions, adding humates to the soil, which are also they're long-term stable forms of soil organic matter, is all they are. Getting that plant root activity working, because the plant excretes a mucilage that also helps bind the soil particles together, and then I get the microbes going. So when I can get all these things working together, I can start to re-aggregate that soil. So go ahead. So wanted to show this because I'm not sure most people understand, when we look at soil, and I hold some in my hand and I can tell, okay, because of its color and its texture, it's probably a clay-based soil. They don't really understand the relative size of the particles that make up soil. And a clay particle is 2 microns or less. Where, and you know, that's the reason for this visualization, is it's very small. and when those clay particles and get compacted, what is happening is there's a mineral ratio in the soil that is getting out of balance. Go ahead to the next one. So we did not do this research. We came across it. There was a couple of individuals that had been looking at what caused clay particles to flocculate versus becoming compacted. And they determined of all the cations in the soil, these four are the most responsible for either aggregating or compacting the clay particles themselves. And based upon their research, they found that calcium ions are about 60% more effective at flocculating and holding those clay particles together so that they allow space in between the platelets. So the clay particles are basically platelets that are negatively charged. And when I can get these minerals that are cations that have positive charges to them, with calcium and magnesium being the divalent, the two primary ones, I can get in between these clay particles, the gray flat pieces. I can hold them apart and create a structure. That structure allows for oxygen and water to get in there. And then that also allows for the biology to start to come back in and flourish. But you have to go to rebuild something, you have to start with the foundation and get it right. And the calcium to magnesium ratio, the mineral ratio in the soil, is the number one. It's the most important mineral ratio in the soil. And that's a distinction that we make all the time that I'm not sure everybody hears because they're used to talking about the plant. But when we talk about calcium being the most important nutrient in the soil, it's not just for the calcium that the plant needs to do all of its processes. It's for the processes it's needed to do in the soil. And when I can get that ratio, depending on the soil type, somewhere in the 5 to 7 to 1 range, I'm starting the process of reaggregating that soil. And you know, we came up with the product, or Stan did, but we're working off of work that other people have done. Some of these guys have been doing this for 40 and 50 years, and they're kind of the pioneers in the regenerative space. And one of this comment right here is amendments with water-soluble calcium levels and humates are recommended, and that's basically what calcium or CaluSolv is designed to be. Go ahead. And this is another individual. He's from Australia. I mean, that's one thing that we have found is we've gotten away from a lot of the university research in the United States. We don't really follow the way they look at things. We've started looking at people from New Zealand and Australia who are a little bit ahead of the curve of the people in the United States and maybe even Europe in some of these processes as far as becoming more regenerative. And again, they're saying the same thing, is that when I can get that calcium in the soil in the levels it needs to be, I can get the oxygen back into the soil. I can start the gas exchange occurs, oxygen in, CO2 out, plant needs a CO2. I'm increasing my photosynthetic efficiency. So that's what we're trying to achieve. So if we look at this slide right here to the right where it says a microaggregate, so there's a progression. Again, I start with flocculating the clay particles. Once I get that process going, then the soil and the microbes in the soil start to form what is called microaggregates. Microaggregates, if you see the round circles with a dot inside of what looks like a cell there, it's a microaggregate. In between there are the bacteria and some organic matter that the bacteria excrete a biofilm that allows them to bind and cling to those clay particles, because that's where they get their mineral nutrients from as well. And as I start to create this process, the microaggregates then are further bound to the plant root, and when I can get mycorrhizal fungi involved, into what is called a macroaggregate. So if you go to the next slide. So this is a bigger representation of what we're trying to achieve, this soil macroaggregate. And there's a lot going on here, but down the middle, you see the plant root, the taproot, and the root hairs off of that. Well, what I have here, when I can get to this point, which is a stable soil aggregate structure, the red items or dots, I guess, whatever you want to call them, those are my microaggregates that we just talked about. the larger coarse sand particles are intertwined in that as well. The blue areas are where water and oxygen are all around this plant, so it has adequate access to oxygen and to water, so it can grow and get deeper and be more robust. And then these fine strands here are the mycorrhizal fungi, and the little yellow things are my bacterial colonies. So when I can create an environment like this, I have bacterial colonies that are beneficial all around these plant roots, all across my field. I have mycorrhizal fungi that are symbiotic to the plant. They feed off plant root exudates, and in return, they go out and they find nutrients and water for the plant and exchange them. And they also communicate between the bacteria, the fungi, and the plant, and they're constantly talking to each other as to what form or what stage of growth they're in and what nutrients they need. And they're feeding each other back and forth. When I can get to that level, and I can pull a plant with a root system out of the ground that looks like the picture we're looking at now, I mean, that is a stable soil aggregate structure that it completely envelops that root, and that plant can, with those microbes, and there's a study from the University of Illinois that shows this, it can get 65 to 70% of the nitrogen it needs. And this was in a 4-year study of corn, maize. It gets 65% of the nitrogen it needs from the atmosphere. It just the biologically fixed nitrogen. It can get almost all of the phosphate it needs from the soil, all the potassium it needs from the soil. It can get all the micronutrients it needs from the soil. When it's doing that and it's photosynthetically efficient, it's also like we are. When we're healthy, our immune systems are healthy. I can fight off 95% of most of the bacterial or viral infections that come my way. So rather than using chemicals before I even know if I need them, I only come back and use them as needed. So to kind of wrap all that up, I mean, to create a stable soil aggregate structure, you can start with a calcium product like calcium, but ultimately it requires producers changing their mindset and changing their management, because there is no magic bullet. You can put our product or other similar products on, and if you're not going to change your management and how you farm that land, then it's not going to change what the result is. So in addition to our product, the customers and clients that we work with, we encourage them to adopt as many of these principles as possible. I mean, go to a reduced or minimized tillage. Some crops we get, root crops, very hard not to have some tillage, but where you can, figure out how to minimize that. Utilize cover crops. I know in the previous presentation that Mary had showed us that the lady had encouraged mulch and compost, and we think those are great products as far as, but they're a little bit limited because of how much you need and how much area we're trying to cover. We look at a cover crop as a living mulch and a living compost. I can plant and it doesn't have to be, in this country, people tend to go overboard. So when we start talking about cover crops, they're looking at doing, multi-species cover crops. It's got 20 different species in it. You don't need to do all of that. It just keeps something growing in there so that the root exudates are constantly feeding the microbes throughout the year. And then as you roll that down or you terminate that cover crop, leave it on the soil as a cover so that it'll decompose and recycle those nutrients, but it also protects the soil from evaporation, keeps it cool. It's going to help with germination of whatever seeds you're planting into it. We encourage them on their cash crop rotations to keep them tighter so they don't have these periods of time where their land is fallow. And when I can do those first three things, we can show them that you can reduce the synthetic chemicals, either fertilizers or herbicides, pesticides that we're applying tremendously. We recommend in the first year of using our product to cut whatever your agronomist or their agronomist is recommending by at least 50%. And when we haven't seen any fall off in production. And over a 2 or 3 year period, we're trying to get them down to where they're off of 90% of what they're using today or more. And we've had success doing that. So just kind of wrap it. Yeah. So again, you can maintain or increase your yields. The big thing that's a key to us, because we deal primarily with produce growers, people who are growing food that we eat, as opposed to corn and soybeans that either are going into fuels today in America or animal feed. But even with, we work with a lot of forage and hay producers as well, because we're trying to, when I get to a more natural system of how I'm growing the crop, the benefit is that I'm increasing the nutrient density and the nutritional value of that crop. So by maintaining yields, I'm reducing my inputs, I'm getting an increased net profit per acre, which we have shown. And then some of the ancillary benefits that are probably more of interest to your group is I'm also increasing water infiltration and retention, I'm increasing my tolerance to the plant of drought, and reducing the incidences of flooding. And then as that water, if we go back to we don't have to, but go back to the visual of the water cycle, I'm getting that water down into the groundwater table as opposed to running off the top of the surface. So as that happens, it's going to increase the water quality. So one of the presentations that we give to people when we're talking about CaluSolv is there's a number of different sources of calcium that people can use, but most people don't and Stan has had an enlightening conversation with the head of the unit of agronomy at Iowa State. They don't understand calcium. We use Agline primarily to adjust the pH of the soil in this country, and I think I'll let Stan get the conversation right. Go ahead.
The term calcium has become synonymous with lime, I think, in this country. If the question is asked, do I have enough calcium? People tend to look at the pH, and we can have a neutral pH. It's assumed that if the pH is neutral, that you've got enough calcium, and that's taught by the universities. But I can take pure beach sand and have a pH of 7 and no calcium in it, virtually no calcium in it. There's just no nutrients in it. So we look at the base saturation, we look at water soluble numbers, we look at calcium from at least 3 different angles with the program that we do. And anyway, so they don't understand the different types of calcium. One calcium is not the next. So
what we did was looked at different sources.
I'm in just in interest of time and having some questions and discussion on this. I'm hoping, Brett, that you could wrap up this portion and go to the case studies. That would be great. And
okay,
then we'll
that's fine.
Questions. So thank you.
So go ahead, Stan.
I'll just cover this real quick. This is a case study we've got from Iowa. We were involved when they planted the field in 2019. So it's been in operation about 5 years now. We've applied no phosphorus, no potassium to this field. This is not the field. It's an alfalfa field. This was a photo that we had on some grass hay. But we've added no phosphorus, no potassium to the field, but our numbers have actually increased on phosphorus, potassium. One of the big things with World of Water and how we impact water, the water infiltration on this field in Iowa, 16 acres. In a period of 3 years, we took water infiltration numbers from 2.5 inches per hour of rainfall to 21 inches per hour. So I'm originally from Mississippi, in the coastal region of Mississippi. So 21 inches of rainfall is normally what a hurricane drops in 2 days. But we were able to put 100% of that water into the soil in an hour. So the significance to water infiltration and now it's filtered water. It's not just water. It's free of pollutions and all this kind of stuff. So yields were same as other fields are getting. It's a non-GMO crop. We've not had to use insecticides or herbicides or fungicides. And we've actually done this with 3 years of below average rainfall. We've got another case study with a lawn, 1 acre, Tyler, Texas. In 2023, we had the hottest, driest summer we've had there in 5 years. We saved using the water meter. They're buying their water, but we saved 98,000 gallons of water for a better, healthier lawn that was free of weeds and just a much better situation. I think that's all of them. I'll just go ahead and summarize. It's my belief soil compaction is the most limiting factor in agriculture. There's not one problem that we face in production agriculture, and I include turf in that we face today that cannot be solved by building soil health, water security, food security, reduction in toxic chemicals that we're using. So pollution, everybody gets upset about erosion. If we send all the rainfall down, we don't have erosion problems. If we build that stable soil aggregate, we can even eliminate a lot of wind erosion. So we believe it's actually very simple. And with that, I'll end up here, and Mary, you can go ahead.
Oops, thank you. Thank you both for a very comprehensive presentation. And perhaps you could remove the slides at this time and we'll get into Q&A because we have some experts on the call, and it's great to see others who have joined us since we started. And I'd like to have Ram Kumar, since you have been focused on aquifer restoration and just heard about this increased infiltration. What are your thoughts, comments, as you think about what India needs? And then we're going to go to Rajaram, Dr. Raj, who's here. So thank you.
Good evening. Thanks, Mary. I hope my voice is reasonably audible.
Yes, we can hear you well.
Or is it very low? I think, unfortunately, I could join very late. I am very sorry. I missed lot of portion of your presentation, but one of the points what I picked up was water infiltration into the soil for maintaining the soil life. Am I right?
Yes.
That will recharge soil. In fact, I'm basically working on practical, simple shallow aquifer recharge, because if you take 1 unit of soil, the solid soil is 50%. Water content is roughly 25%. Voids are 25%. So, in case we don't provide water, automatically soil becomes dead. Soil becomes
Right.
dead. Then all the living organism in the soil becomes dead. And structurally also soil has got the best strength at optimum moisture content. And whatever you are doing, adding value to the soil is quite wonderful. I'll go through the details again. I'm using this simple scalable method.
Right.
So, unfortunately, I missed a lot of your. I could join quite late today, but thankful to you for adding to the value. And this is my contribution would be on practically providing simple rainwater to the soil. If you deprive water to the soil, soil dies. This has been what I've been doing. Thank you.
Yes, which is fantastic. Your work with sustainability and leading these efforts to restore the groundwater could be aided by this CaluSolv or the simple practices that the gentlemen have outlined. So thank you for joining. And Dr. Raj, your thoughts. I know you also weren't able to hop on right away, but are very familiar with India's needs. So thoughts.
Thank you, Mary. Brett and Stan, I think you have really focused on the importance of soil physics and soil chemistry for agricultural outputs that we expect from the soil. And these basic things are neglected many, many times. We just take, soil, and it's rain-fed agriculture in India mostly. So if rain doesn't come, we just say, oh, that's our fate. Instead of saying, what can we do to the soil to whatever water we have, maximize its impact on improving soil productivity. And some other things you mentioned are extremely helpful. And your CaluSolv can be a big help in India. And Hari and others there who know the market very well, you enter the India market. That's my suggestion.
We have a, if I may interject here, we have a publication or a piece of information that says from 1989 to 2017, the U.S. government paid out $67 billion in crop subsidies because of crop losses. 85% of that went to two issues, drought and flooding, which soil health is able to mitigate both of those. We with our product and the program, it's a norm to see our fields greener during short seasons of drought because they have access to more water. So flooding, Brett talked about the fields. He drives across Illinois and Indiana, and the amount of rainfall, the fields are flat, fairly flat, and they just hold the water. It's got to run off because of the practices that we've used. So.
Well, and that is, as Brett said, what most excites us at Global Waterworks. If the basic foundation of our earth can be addressed so that it becomes the storage vehicle as well as the retention vehicle,
Right.
and the filtration vehicle, we address three parts of our water problem, the water quality, the scarcity, or the excessive aspects of water with flooding. So we can conquer the issues at the soil level, just as you're saying. Don't worry about the plant, attack the soil. So I love this. And I'm going to go to Chandra momentarily, because he has knowledge of how this would be distributed or what the economics might be in India of using this, and may have some questions on that. But Cindy Eretz is here, and she's on the call from Australia. It's very late at night, but she is working on restoring the earth, and Regenerate Earth is her company. Cindy, I'm wondering if you could comment on how this complements those aspects that we heard a few months ago with Dee Dee talking about the soil sponge.
Hey, sorry, I had trouble on about the first 5 minutes. Yeah, fantastic presentation. I really love what you're doing. I was just wondering what sort of costs are involved with your product.
Well, go ahead, Stan.
I was going to say we have done everything we can do to make it cost neutral with what people are using as fertilizers, especially when we tell people we are not a fertilizer. We have not recommended phosphorus or potassium in 5 years with the system of soil testing that we use, because we found that those nutrients are already there. The 1,600 samples that we have from 23 states show that the average farm in America today has somewhere between current prices, somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 worth of nutrients in the top 6 inches per acre. So it's a matter of just starting to release that. As far as actual prices, probably retail, where are we? Somewhere around just a single application, $260 an acre. But then we start picking up on things. We've got to look at the whole environment.
Of course.
We start looking at things like reduced insecticides, reduced fungicides. When a person's willing to look at everything, the cost savings start coming in. And again, our desire is to fix the customer's soil. If he will apply more product and utilize all of the techniques together, he can make those advances in his soil health. And in 3 years, we see customers who don't need our product hardly at all. So that's our goal, is to wean them off of all of the inputs that they're putting down. So is that a good answer?
Yeah, terrific. I love it. It's really, it's a great tool. And it's a great mechanism to get the practice change happening at the same time. Amazing. Thank you.
One thing I'd like to add to what Stan just said is that's part of what we're trying to educate people to as well. Is we've talked with some leading regenerative people in the United States. Stan's familiar with them, and they kind of consistently tell us that if we just adopt the practices, in 8 to 10 years, I can get my soil from a poor state to a regenerative, what I call regenerated state, whatever. And as Stan alluded to, using our product, we can shorten that time frame because we're accelerating the flocculation of the soil with the product. And we can get you there in 3 years or 4 years, which to a producer, that if I can shorten that time frame and reduce that risk when I'm worried about my production and costs and everything, it makes it a little easier for them to start to transition. We also generally recommend that they need to learn how to do this. So we don't, say someone's farming 1,000 acres, we don't say, put us on 1,000 acres. Try us on 5% of your area, figure out how we work, figure out what works for you, because every operation is also different. Every area is different. Lands, soil types are different. But once that owner figures it out on that 5 to 10% piece, then he can roll it out over everything else. And we're just trying to mitigate that risk of trying to adopt something new, because that's our biggest hurdle. You find people that have been doing something some way generations, getting them to change their mind and educating them on something different. That's a huge, huge hurdle.
Yeah. Well, very interesting. And what's nice is we have a global perspective here, also with Festus Langit joining in from Africa, where they've been challenged, surprisingly, in sub-Saharan Africa with flooding and also with a mix of floods and droughts, and soil is a huge part of that. Festus, could you maybe comment on the relevance of this to what you're seeing in Africa and local crops or farming efforts? Thank you for joining.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I've learned a lot today. Actually, in Africa, we have lots of problem with soil. And it's because most of the people took the use of chemicals in weeding and in all those pest control, and the use of excess. And it led to the destruction of soil, because the microorganisms were destroyed, and this led to the degradation of the quality of the yield. So actually, we need this knowledge in Africa, especially in Kenya, because people perceive the use of chemicals in a wrong way, and now they are realizing that they destroy the soil structure, and everything needs to be restored. It needs to be renewed for the production of more food. So we realize we need to heal the soil. That's what I've actually learned today in this meeting. So also this issue of floods and of drought in our country have worsened the situation, because apart from the soil being maybe destroyed, a lot of all those I've followed, and I was just thinking that we need this in our country. So actually, thank you for these lessons, and it's really relevant in our country. I think I'll need a copy of all these, so that, or if possible, so you may send some people to our country, because we need these lessons.
Yes,
Thank
well,
you.
Festus, thank you. And you are very productive in our Global Waterworks community too, which I will post in the chat. So you will be able to get the booklet, the guidance documents, and also some of this insight on the USDA stats and the challenges that are that have come about because of excessive chemicals. Now, before I turn it over to Chandra for comments on the distribution opportunity, Stan or Brett, Stan, could you perhaps comment on your desires for distribution around the world? Are you wanting to set up posts, or would you like to have other countries with knowledge of the local groups share your product capabilities?
I'm going to defer that to Brett.
Well,
he's the guy that gets it made. So
yeah, so thanks for the question, Mary. I mean, the thing that we need to be mindful of is we're a small company, right? So we've been in business for about 4 or 5 years now, and we're growing. I know Stan from the very start has indicated we want to share this knowledge and would love to share the product with people in Africa, in India, wherever. We have not thought too much about how to distribute it into other countries. More than likely, I would believe it would need local manufacturing, because the logistics of moving a product like this, a dry product, our product is a dry granular product that is broadcast spread. So moving it, from a production facility in the US to somewhere, you're going to add so much cost to the logistics that it becomes problematic. So the issue would be finding and sourcing raw materials in various parts and figuring out how to do it locally. So we'd be open to sharing that information in some sort of agreement. We don't have a model or anything like that we've put together. So yeah, we're very early stages of that, I guess, would be the best way to answer that question.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. And your trial approach makes it easy for someone to assess before they get in more deeply.
Exactly, right.
Thank you. So Chandra, I'm hoping you could unmute and sort of comment on this as a potential opportunity, or where it is needed in India. Value your guidance.
Yeah, actually, when there was a huge drought and lack of food for India some 30-40 years ago, there was this chemical revolution. Okay, people resorted to chemical practicing using pesticides and things. Gradually had that self-sufficiency for the whole country. India is such a big country, so food self-sufficiency was the priority. At that time, without any second thought, they went to this chemical practice. But now people are realizing that the soil is already dead by overusing these chemicals. Now we are resorting back to the age-old practice of India, because in India, 73% are agrarian-based business or industry. Okay, so what our ancestors used are much more beneficial, so natural, and what is being explained in this presentation today. So we use cow dung-based, native cow dung-based manure or pesticides, natural pesticides, using neem and other such material locally available. And also they go for rotational crops. And the mulching happens, the crop weed which is cut is mulched back into the soil, so that there is more nutrition available to the soil, and acts as a sponge, and naturally it holds water the way it should be. So we don't depend on any ready mix or ready products from the market. And these are all traditionally being practiced ages. Now we are trying to rediscover and re-engineer our old practices and going back to that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mary, if I can say something, some of the trials that we've conducted with food crops, with vegetables, it's common for us to see anywhere from a 10 to 15, even 20% increase in the nutrient density of those crops. So, I think the philosophy in America, well, has been grow more food than we need, but in the process, they have decreased the quality of the food, so it takes more food to feed people. Of course, if we can increase the nutrient density 15%, we're still getting the same amount of food, just less packages to move around. So we waste about 40% of the food in this country from the farm to the fork. And this can help eliminate a lot of that.
Yeah, another point I want to make is, very sorry for interrupting. India, the soil is very different in different states and different regions. Okay, some places may be calcium rich already. So we cannot have a ready mix like the calcium-based mineral or anything to be added or something like that blindly. Every soil, every region has to be clearly tested for its soil content. What is the mineral or salt or anything in excess or in less quantity, which is needed for the soil nutrition. So soil testing is a most important thing. Most of the agriculture departments educates their farmers. First they test the soil, then the water, and then they decide what type of crop should be grown there. So I think India has advanced in these measures very high. So there cannot be any ready fix for every soil. So, and depending upon the nutrients available in the soil, the crops are decided. What type of rotational crops we need to put into the soil and what type of crops can grow in rotation. How the same crop suite could be put into mulching. Thereby the nutrition value of the soil is being maintained. So it's a very diverse subject and very diverse thing to put it in a nutshell. But India has gone yards ahead and maybe notches ahead in terms of understanding our landscape, our soil, and then mitigating it. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And Chandra, that was a beautiful recap.
Just to add a point.
Yeah, go ahead, Ramkumar.
I think to what Chandra said, this mulching also reduces the evaporation loss of the soil. Am I right, Chandra?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So that simple technique reduces the evaporation loss of it maintains the soil moisture, which also adds. Just a point.
Yeah, no, excellent. And that's why we are actually always thrilled to be talking with you gentlemen. And the WOW Global group is just a key partner to us at Global Waterworks because you try things earlier. You have much more immediate need for everything because of both the population size and the extremes of the weather that you're facing there. So we really appreciate the innovation that we see happening and being put to use. And that's where I'm wondering, Chandra, you didn't mention like the potential for testing of this, or Ram Kumar, I'm wondering if perhaps a test of this may be something you would value doing, or did we hear you say that there's enough of this already going on? I put the note on the work in Andhra Pradesh. So is this needed, or are you guys already doing sort of comparable work? I think there may not be a market here.
No, in fact, the soil test is done very in a small amount, like let us say 30 rupees or 40 rupees, maybe a quarter of a dollar. And it has been taught to the local women. The self-help groups are there with small handheld kits to sense the soil and test the soil, test the water. These are being taught in the local panchayat levels, the village levels, so that they are dependent on understanding science, make it simpler to use, and then apply it into their agricultural field or land. And a lot of companies are coming with IoT-based solutions where they can sense the water even using drones and the satellite imagery. Then they can sense the soil and water available in that region. Then advise the farmers who are illiterate what type of crops could they grow. So a lot is happening in India. I think it would be good for the people in the US come down to India, understand the Indian demography and the soil, and then try to see where we could fit in and apply.
Yeah. And since their hands are sort of full with what they're doing in America right now, would this be something that you would recommend they pursue? Or it wasn't clear to me, do you think there's a market for additional augmentation materials like CaluSolv, or do you think there's enough going on that India right now would not be?
The problem is educating the traditional farmers who have been practicing something for a long period is very difficult. So educating them is the biggest challenge, irrespective of whether it is Africa or India, right? So once
Yeah.
the basic knowledge of soil and water nexus is being told and drilled into their brain, no chemical or no just ready fix can change their mindset. That is the toughest challenge the government is facing. So what happens now? A lot of youngsters are turning down to agriculture. They may be an IT person, they may be a guy with computer background, but now they are going back to the roots, understanding that unless we improve agriculture, India is going to become very difficult in terms of food sufficiency, as the population is also exploding in one side. So a lot of, interestingly, a lot of engineers and good qualified people are going back to agriculture, focusing more on agriculture. A lot of people have thrown their jobs in computer and other things are going back to agriculture. That is a good sign. More youngsters come scientifically, they belong to the same place. So what happened? They go to their own native place. They try to explain the elders how science can transcend and still keep the old practices alive and see a balance out of both. So that is happening now, and we, in fact, governments are subsidizing and encouraging them with grants, awards, and freebies, income tax reliefs, and stuff like that to make agriculture a good value proposition for youngsters to get into agripreneurship. We call it as agripreneur. Entrepreneur is now called as an agripreneur. So a lot of interesting things are happening. There's a separate board called Startup India team, and there is a separate board for people to encourage get into agriculture. There are agriculture colleges across the country. More than 30,000 agriculture colleges are there in the country who only focus on these type of interventions. How do we have a balance between the modern science and the traditional practices? And they are implementing region-specific systems to make agriculture a value proposition and something economically viable. That's happening really big in India, and I think a lot to learn. In fact, see, places like US, you have a standard system. Everything is done in one go. Here it is a mixed type of culture, mixed type of people, mixed type of understanding. Even language is different from one place to other. It's not one common English. So making everybody understand the local need and the local balancing is a difficult task. That is what the government does. So they're encouraging local entrepreneurs who can understand their local soil, local people, local agriculture, and then try to practice it in a better way. It's a very complex thing, and I cannot decide. I'm just also an observer, trying to do my chip of thing. But we are also encouraging a lot of young entrepreneurs wanted to become agripreneurs, and give what we try to say, because we are in between. We are stuck between the old and the new. So we try to act as a bridge to bring these two people together, make the old people understand what modern technology could bring in, and the newcomers what the ancient heritage has given us a value addition to the system. So that's very important.
Yes. Well, thank you, Chandra. And I think, gentlemen, perhaps you have questions of the team. Basically, Chandra recap the initiatives, both with the digital data monitoring and also the holistic return to natural and local farming, which I think is also happening in Africa with 1 acre farms or focused areas and people moving back to distributed systems rather than all these central urban areas. But you gentlemen also have a process that you customize the assessment or the application, I believe, based on the soil analysis. And you didn't actually address that in your talk. I'm wondering if you could talk about the process that you use. And I welcome anyone else who's on the call, Mahesh, Nikki, Balu, Senthil Kumar, or Hari, if you'd like to comment or just unmute and chat, but maybe I could turn it back to Stan and Brett to just ask if you could talk about that customization.
Yes, thank you, Mary. I think, hello, Stan, once again for a wonderful presentation. Gopalji, namaskar. Are you there? No, I think he's left.
Gopalji had to hop.
He did, I know. Yeah. Nikki, do you want to add anything? I know soil and water is not your domain. You work more on urban sanitation. Is there anything you want to add, Nikki? No.
Yeah, he unmuted.
No, not really. I mean, we've tried a whole bunch of things ourselves. We've been learning from a whole bunch of other people on what you have all these various terms that been flying around, right? Like zero budget natural farming to organic farming to a whole bunch of other things.
Right.
And I mean, I'm not. I mean, I'm not the right person to speak about this,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
what I can say, at least like at one whatever is, I echo what Chandra's been saying, that we can't
Right.
have one solution that can just kind of like be a fix it for especially in soil conditions in India, across India. When you're trying to have we have a water crisis, we have a
Yeah.
climate crisis.
Yeah.
And all this, if we're trying, like, I mean, we're also trying to, halve the
Yes.
water that we're trying to put into
Right. Yeah.
irrigating our crops,
Yeah.
and
Right.
getting, more output out of it, while being organic, while being like non-pesticide.
Right.
So it's a
Yeah.
challenge.
Right. He's right about this, Stan and Brett. I'm sure you know that we are about 3.5 million square kilometers. We are about 55% as declared agricultural lands. I'm not suggesting that all of it is being cultivated. The other is that we have about 28 different types of soils, to pick up from where Nikki left it. And this diversity of soils will mean, as you also said, that that we need to look at solutions that are a little localized, while challenges may be universal. This is one part. The other, Mary, what Raj suggested of our exploring some possibilities of some of these people here as professionals and as entrepreneurs in the agricultural sector, wanting to shall we say, talk to Stan and Brett. Is that something we need to sort of take up from after this meeting? Mary?
Was muted. Yeah, I think Cindy and I are going to put together, this is very valuable information for Global Waterworks, and it sounds like there are enough initiatives going on with India right now that I think we're going to structure the conversation or support ongoing dialogue within the Global Waterworks platform, and also are happy to have anyone, from the WOW Global group chime in there. But I'm not hearing a huge appetite or a need with the many other initiatives that are going on right now, Hari.
You're right.
Does that answer your question?
Right. True, it does. Chandra, any thoughts on that as to how we can, collaborate with CaluSolv for work here in India?
And
not really, sir. I cannot. Not an expert, full-time agriculturist.
Correct.
But they can give a try. Maybe I'm not very clear on what they give actually, whether it's a mineral composition, whether it's a ready mix for because CaluSolv or something. I know it's something calcium based. Okay.
Correct.
But it cannot be a ready reckoner or a ready instant medicine for everybody or every soil. So it's a very subjective matter. I think Gopalji or I miss in fact Munibai Rawalji here today.
I know. But Gopalji would have been, yes.
He would have been given. He would be giving some better answers than me. Yeah, I'm just trying to fill the gaps. Thank you, sir.
I know. Thank you. Stan, or Brett, do you have anything to say in response to Chandra?
I'll let Stan jump in to answer Mary's question about the soil health evaluation. But the one thing I would say is, we understand that in a country the size of India, you've got many different climates and soil types, and we have the same situation here. It may not be as varied as 20 different types, but we deal with customers from the west, where it's more arid and alkaline soils, to the southeast, where it's the exact opposite because of rainfall. Levels are a lot higher, where it's more acidic and the soils are more heavily probably clay based until you get down into the coastal areas where it's more sandy. So I guess the universal thing that I would say though is that the modern practices that Chandra was talking about of using chemicals, they're universal in what they do to the soil. It doesn't matter the soil type because it's affecting the soil biology. And we've destroyed that soil biological structure in all types of soils. So the amount or the practices that you would implement may change, and I agree with that on the localized solutions, but I think the basic principles are still the same. You've got to address soil compaction to get oxygen and water back into the soil to invigorate that microbial life. And
Right.
It's probably more localized to the individual and the crops he's growing. I agree that in you're trying to grow that shouldn't be grown in that soil, in that environment. So those are all things that need to be looked at and taken in totality, as opposed to
Yep. Fair point. Absolutely. Over to you, Mary.
Yes, Stan's got a comment. Yeah, on that.
As far as the soil health evaluation, we do there's a fact sheet from Cornell University that says that the soil test that's used in America today, probably in the world, I mean, the majority of them, it's a mild acid test, and it's designed to look at the plant. And the quote from Cornell is, it's not a soil test, it's a test designed to show you a positive crop response when you add phosphate fertilizer. So it's our focus, again, goes back to the soil health evaluation. We do a water soluble soil test. We do that mild acid test that the universities and all of there are variations of it across this country, depending on where you live. They've tweaked it a little bit with the acids that are used. But then we also do what's called a total nutrient extraction, which is where we see the nutrients that can only be unlocked through soil biology. So everything that we need is in that soil. It's just a matter of balancing a few things. And we've seen positive responses with sandy soils. It doesn't matter the soil type. Clay soils, heavy clays, silts, every one of them, if we use a penetrometer, we find soil compaction issues. And so none of us know our problems when it comes to the soil, because we don't use the right tools. We focus on the crop. And again, that points us in the wrong direction. Right. So soil health evaluation, our website, we could work with you. Certainly you couldn't send soils to our lab in the US, but we could probably work with our lab to give you the acids and the extraction methods, so that the labs in India and other countries could utilize that same information. We can explain it if we have the information.
Excellent. Now, Hari, Sandeep had a comment. I think he joined.
And Sandeep has worked on soils and water. He will be competent to give us some insights. Yes, Sandeep.
Hi. Firstly, apologies. I misread the timing on the poster. I assumed the meeting is at 7. So I joined at 7. But I'm assuming that what you've discussed is about it's something that falls in the domain of agroecology or natural farming. Some sites. So yeah, I mean, as long I'd like to address those questions where people asked about diverse locations and stuff like that.
And you have read also, I'm sure, I put it up on the WhatsApp group also, of the profiles of the two of them and of the work that they do.
Yes, yes.
So, you responded.
Yeah. So I was responding to the question from the audience who were asking, when you have diverse situations and different agroclimatic regions and all that. Now, very often we humans have this, this is a modern culture of overcomplicating things. We rarely go to the basics. We rarely go to the simpleness of things. And this is an affliction of our minds. If you really look at soils, all that we need to understand about, if you want to do any form of agriculture, is that we need to understand the soil has to be a home for microbes. Without that, there's no agriculture. It's
Mhm.
because we destroy the microbiome on the soil by exposing it to the sun with modern agricultural practices, because which makes it necessary to use chemicals in the first place. Because when you don't have microbes and you don't have soil critters, the natural conditions under which the soil becomes nutrition is lost. Therefore, we have to have inputs into the soil. So this having to need inputs into the soil is because of bad management. And that's basic. It applies to a desert region, it applies to an alluvial region, it applies to a tropical climate, it applies to a temperate climate. If you don't understand soil and what goes on below the soil, then we have no understanding of what to do with it. And this, I think, is common to every area. So if we understand that the microbes have to have a home, soil critters have to have a home, and what conditions encourage it, which is you build a local ecosystem where you have adequate soil cover, we have adequate benevolent, like you kind of a benign ecosystem with diversity as replicated from nature, then you've got it right. It works everywhere. And I know this from experience because we did a community farming experiment where we took a patch of land, not big, about half an acre. It was completely, I mean, it used to be an eucalyptus commercial farm. So basically they were growing eucalyptus trees. The soil was totally destroyed. It was all pulled out, and the owner allowed us to do a community farming experiment. All that we did is from all our surrounding apartments, we collected the garden residue. When people mowed their lawns, we would collect it. When leaves fall from trees, we would collect it. We would just bring it and dump it on the soil and just spread it out. Within a week, that soil started doing wonders. And we did not have water in that land because it didn't have irrigation or pipe. It was just a piece of land. Without watering, we saw that the place started blooming. And we used to just plant saplings or seeds that we need, making small holes in between the crop cover that we created, and things just started growing. We had harvest within 2 weeks, and we grew a diverse amount of vegetables and fruits. I have videos on this. I can share this with you. It was an excellent experiment. It was amazing. We were growing wild. I mean, we had like a little food forest in no time, with no irrigation, no water, no fertilizer, nothing. All we did was cover the soil. Zero inputs. So
that a passionate man.
Things are possible if you understand soil.
Well, reason to get excited, clearly. I think these simple solutions, it's beautiful, Sandeep. That was a great ending. Before I turn it over to Hari just for a summary comment, Stan or Brett, did you have any questions or final comments? Maybe Stan first.
I don't. I'm thankful. We appreciate the opportunity to present this information. I do agree. It's communication and education, and it's hard to break tradition sometimes, and that's not sometimes, really all the time. But once we start doing that, you know, when we show with our soil health evaluation, when we show someone that they have $5,000 worth of nutrients already in their soil, the question becomes, okay, why am I buying fertilizers? Why am I buying these other things? They realize they already have what they need. So anyway, we appreciate the opportunity. We appreciate everyone's attendance and the questions, and look forward to assisting in any way that we can. So
awesome. Thanks. And Brett,
yeah, no, thank you again. And the one thing I would just add to what Sandeep was saying, and we absolutely agree with what he pointed out, is that the soil has all the nutrients it needs. It has all the microbes that they need. They're just dormant. They're waiting for the right environment. So when you provide them with the right environment, they take off and they take over, and that's what we got to get back to.
Yeah, well, amen. And I think, Hari, your team at the World of Water, it's all about action. And it seems like there needs to be a soil addressing, because your team has been crying out for, how do we look at this? What are your thoughts on it as sort of the foundational piece to get our whole water and ecosystem right?
Right. Well, you're right about that, Mary. And I must say that to both of you, Stan and Brett, that your website is very comprehensive, very easy to read, and simple on its explanations of conceptual frameworks and solutions that you have. That's first. And the second is that, as I said, this country is way too large to be, to begin to, we don't know where to start to address these solutions. You talked about tradition. Chandra put out something on the chat box of how we have traditions and texts that are 3,000 years old and more, which talk, in very graphic, very simple ways of what we need to be doing with our soils. So we have a challenge. We are at about 300 million tons of food grains today. If I were to only take food grains, add another, say, 25-30% of that as other produce, cash crops and vegetables and so on. And we need to be increasing this by at least another 100-150 million tons, right? We are way behind China, although between the two countries, we have more or less the same amount of cultivable land at about 150 million hectares or 1.5 million square kilometers. And China is producing 150 tons more, even as is now. And it's been so for the last, say, 5 to 8 years. So I don't know what China has done. China has a lot more problems when it comes to water and abuse of groundwater resources. We too have those same problems of groundwater. 70% of our cultivation water comes from groundwater. And therefore, as Chandra will testify, we have challenges of arsenic and fluoride and iron and nitrates running at 500 ppm in some of these parts, regions of the country. So we have multiple issues. We need to see how we, like you said, one of you said that we must sort of engage and find out. You talked about how we could send you perhaps some lab test reports and so on for you to figure out and tell us what it can be. Chandra asked about what those specific interventions are that you can offer. I think all of this will mean some kind of a set of mail exchanges. Maybe we need to see how we can, trigger something like that, get to a more clear standpoint on what we can do to, help Stan and Brett to sort of, stage presence in India. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I think everyone's been offered a chance to comment. Michael Mutai just joined us from Africa also, and he mentioned the value of the permaculture practices. And there's a group called Water Stories, where I met Cindy Eretz, and that's another organization, another mighty network that may be useful too for these conversations on how we move the earth and satisfy our fertilizer needs. So I know we're over time, so I'm just going to wish everyone a blessed weekend and just thank you all very much for these comments. And yes, Hari, we will continue the conversations. And
thank you so much, Mary, for doing this month after month. Stan and Brett must have realized by now that she does this wonderful show every first Friday of the month. She's been doing an amazing job getting people from across the world, from across, of course, your own country. Thank you so much, Mary, once again. Yeah.
With your help, you guys. Yes. Have a blessed weekend, everyone. Thank you for joining. Okay, we'll have a recording up next week. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Right. Have a great day and weekend. Yeah.